Okay, I hope that everybody is having a great Wednesday. We are continuing on in our journey through the Gospel of Mark today. We are trekking through Mark chapter 5, and the story is really starting to get good. Once again, some of the most famous stories in all of Scripture, some of the most famous stories in the Gospels happen here in Mark chapter 5, and Jesus is revealing himself ever more clearly as each chapter of Mark comes along. And that exact same thing is happening here in Mark 5 as well. Up to this point, we have watched Jesus reveal himself to be the long-promised Son of God. In Genesis 3, God promised he would send a son who is going to crush the head of the serpent, destroy the forces of darkness, destroy the devil, undo the fall, unbreak the world, redeem humanity, and restore all things. In Genesis 12, he reaffirms that promise to Abraham. He says he is going to send a son through Abraham who is going to cause all the families of the earth, all the peoples of the earth, all the nations of the earth to be blessed. They will be blessed. How? They'll be blessed by being redeemed and restored as he crushes the serpent, destroys the forces of darkness, undoes the fall, and unbreaks the world. Through David, the greatest king of Israel, he promises, I am going to send a son through you who is going to establish my kingdom forever, more deeply than you can ever even begin to imagine, who will break my rule and my reign into your fallen and broken world once and for all. My kingdom where there is no grief or suffering or crying or mourning or pain. My kingdom in which the fall is undone, the world is unbroken, and all things are restored forever. Jesus shows us one step at a time, in one way after another, that he is that Son of God, Son of Eve, Son of Abraham, Son of David that we have been waiting for since the very beginning, since the fall. And he is continuing that once again here in Mark chapter 5. We saw yesterday that he has power as the Son of God. He has authority as the Son of God, the great King over all things, the one that God has sent to redeem us and restore us. He has the power not only over sickness and health, not only over healing the paralyzed and the mute and the deaf and so forth. He has power not only to cast out demons. He has power not only to forgive sin, not only the power to break oppressive human traditions. He even has the power as the long-promised Son of God to to quiet the winds and the waves. There is a life-threatening storm that is going to capsize the ship that he and the disciples are on, and he tells the wind, settle down, and it settles down. He tells the waves, be still, and they are still. He tells the storm, stop, and it stops. He has God's divine authority as the long-promised Son of God to literally command the weather to be still, and it will be still. And today we see even further, as the long-promised Son of God, Jesus has God's divine kingly authority over life and death. A synagogue leader named Jairus comes, and his daughter is on her deathbed. And while he is trying to bring Jesus to come heal her, a messenger comes and says, don't bother the rabbi anymore. Your daughter just passed away. It's too late. And Jesus says, I'm going to pretend I didn't hear that. And he keeps on going to the synagogue leader's house, and he walks into the synagogue leader's house, and they're already mourning. They've already begun to essentially like sit Shiva for his daughter. They have already begun the process of sitting with the family and mourning with the family in the house. Her body is still up in the bed. Her corpse is still upstairs. Jesus says, where's the girl? And they send him upstairs, and he says, I don't know what you're all doing here. I don't know why you're all crying. She's not dead. She's just asleep. That's a joke. By the way, Jesus was funny. Jesus had a sense of humor. The God of the universe who created humor has to have a sense of humor. So I don't know why it would surprise us, but Jesus comes there and he says, so, I hear you guys think this sleeping girl is dead. I will be correcting that false assumption today. So he walks in, he makes this frankly kind of inappropriate joke in terms of, like the standards of propriety and so on and so forth of the time. But then he goes upstairs, he takes this little girl's hand and he says, get up. And she gets up. He says, wake up. And she wakes up. He says, stop being dead. And her corpse stops being dead. She rises from the grave. He resuscitates her as the long-promised Son of God. Jesus has God's divine kingly authority over life and death. And more than that, as the Son of God, he is breaking God's rule and God's reign into our fallen and broken world by raising this girl from the dead. He is imaging God's kingdom where there is no death. He is illustrating God's kingdom where there is no death. He is reflecting and proclaiming God's kingdom where there is no death, no grief, no mourning, no crying, no pain, no loss, no suffering, no sickness, no any of those things. And one day that kingdom will come in its fullness. But today, Jesus is ushering in that kingdom. He is beginning to pull that kingdom into the brokenness of our world that is filled with death and grief and crying and mourning and pain and suffering and sickness. By raising up this one little girl, he is proclaiming the deathless kingdom that is coming here and now. And because that is true, everyone looking on immediately knew exactly what they were looking at. He didn't say it. He didn't turn around and say, so, I am the Messiah. I am the Son of God. I am the one you've been waiting for. I am the great king from the line of David, who is king not only over Israel, but of all creation. And I am going to undo the fall and unbreak the world and redeem humanity and restore all things. He doesn't turn around and say that right now. But he doesn't have to. Anyone watching this play out who's not dumber than a bag of hammers knows exactly what they're looking at, who they're looking at, who this is, and what it means. Even the demons. When Jesus goes to a place called Decapolis and he goes to a region in Decapolis, it's either the Gadarenes or the Gerasenes or the Gergesenes. We don't know. Different early manuscripts of Mark's gospel use different words there. Some of them say the Gadarenes, some of them say the Gerasenes, some of them say the Gergesenes. It doesn't matter because those are all areas in the Decapolis. So he's somewhere in the Decapolis and there's a demon-possessed man and he heals this demon-possessed man. He casts the demon out and the demon testifies to who he is. The demon looks straight at him and says, I know you. You're the Son of God. You're the son of David. You're the son of Abraham. You're the son of Eve. You're the one that God promised was going to come one day and was going to break us, who's going to break our backs over his knees, who's going to crush us, who's going to crush the head of our leader. You are the long-promised Son of God who is going to cast us into the abyss and torment us for all of eternity. Why are you here right now? You should not be here yet. The day has not come. The demon knows exactly who he is. And so ironically, the demon testifies to the true identity of Jesus before any human testifies to the true identity of Jesus. He is the Son of God that God promised in Genesis, who is going to redeem humanity and restore the world, who's going to undo the fall, unbreak the world, and put everything right again, who's going to bless all the peoples and nations and families of the earth, who is going to establish God's glorious kingdom of light and love and goodness and glory and beauty once and for all. That's who he is. But as the long-promised Son of God, Jesus does not do what we would expect him to do. Right here in this chapter, he does something that nobody would have anticipated. Number one, he goes and he restores the outcasts. He goes and he restores this woman who's been bleeding for years. Specifically, she would have had a 12-year-long menstrual cycle. She has been non-stop menstruating for years. Why does that matter? It matters because in the ancient world, in the ancient Near East, where all of this takes place, every single culture, every single society, every single religion, all of them saw menstrual blood as being unclean, which meant that whether you were Israelite or you were part of the pagan world, whether you were in Israel or you were in one of the Gentile nations, whatever, no matter what, wherever you were in the ancient Near East, if you were menstruating, then they would have seen you as being ritually unclean. It did not mean sinful. Ritually unclean is not the same thing. They didn't consider that sinful. They didn't see it as a moral thing. But they believed that if you were ritually unclean, you could not go into the temple or the tabernacle. You could not go be in the presence of the God that your village worshipped. You could not go anything like that. You had to ritually purify yourself once you finished menstruating so that you could once again be part of the community, so that you could once again be part of the religious ceremonies and so on and so forth. And because that is true, if you were menstruating, people wouldn't touch you. They wouldn't go near you, because if they touched you, then they would also become ritually unclean. So for 12 years, no one will touch this woman. No one will come near this woman. No one will allow this woman in their life. This woman has been outside the camp for 12 years. She has been an outcast for 12 years. Now, if you were a first century Israelite, you would probably just not see that as a high priority. You would not see restoring people who were ritually unclean as a high priority. You would say, that's too bad for them, but that's their problem. If she wants to be ritually clean, she should just stop menstruating. It wouldn't even occur to you that she can't. But it occurs to Jesus. It occurs to God. God himself has come down from heaven to rub elbows with humanity in Jesus Christ, and he sees this woman who has been menstruating and therefore ritually unclean for 12 years of her life. And he says, you, be healed. You, be made clean. You, be restored to the community. He says, you are not an outcast anymore. You are not outside the camp anymore. You are not a stranger anymore. I am making you clean. so that you can be gathered together with the rest of my people again. He is rescuing her from her outcastness. He's rescuing her from the margins. And number two, as Son of God, Jesus breaks down the barriers of the Gentiles in Decapolis. So, in the Old Testament, God has gathered together the descendants of Abraham, and he has gathered them into a nation. He's gathered them into a kingdom. He has made them into a people. And their job was to proclaim the good news about this God, Yahweh, the God who rescued them from Egypt and gave them the law of Moses and so on and so forth. Their job was to proclaim the good news of this God to all the surrounding nations, so that those surrounding nations could hear about the true God. They could leave behind false worship of their false gods, and they could come throw themselves at the feet of Yahweh, the God of Israel, the God of the Exodus, the God of Abraham, the God of Moses. That was their calling. And yet the Israelites refused to do that. They didn't want to share the good news with the Gentiles. They wanted to be God's favored people over the Gentiles. They wanted to conquer the Gentiles. They wanted to rule the Gentiles. They didn't want the Gentiles gathered in God's covenant. They wanted to keep God's covenant all to themselves. So they put up huge walls between themselves and the Gentiles. They hated the Gentiles. They referred to the Gentiles as cattle. And they left them to languish, worshiping false gods, pagan gods, suffering under the injustice of the wicked Gentile nations. By the time Jesus arrived, all the Gentile nations should have made their way into God's covenant alongside Israel, but Israel refused to do its job, to do its mission. Israel wanted to be God's favored little boy. Israel did not want to be the firstborn of many of God's children. So what does Jesus do here in Mark 5? He makes a beeline for the Decapolis. Why does that matter? Because Decapolis was a Gentile territory in Israel. There were Jews in Decapolis, but the overwhelming majority of the people in the Decapolis region were Gentiles. It was a heavily Gentile area. So he goes to the Decapolis and he finds this demon-possessed man. This is a man who was born in Decapolis. The people of Decapolis probably grew up with him. They probably know him. They probably grew up going to school with him. If they had bikes, they would have grown up riding their bikes with him, everything like that. And yet a demon has taken hold of him, ruined his life, made him go mad, and caused him also now to be an outcast from society. So Jesus rescues a Jewish outcast. Takes away her 12-year-long menstrual cycle, and he rescues a Gentile outcast, this demon-possessed man. He goes to this Gentile region, goes to this Gentile man, and he says, "Demon, be gone." And the demon leaves, and the man is set free. But those demons beg to be sent into a herd of pigs. This is like 2,000 pigs. That means this is a massive herd of pigs. These are pigs that are being farmed and taken care of, and so on and so forth. This is the equivalent of tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of pigs here in the Decapolis. And Jesus sends the demons over into the pigs. And I don't know why they do this. Maybe it's that demons are stupid. Maybe it's that the pigs rejected these demonic parasites. Maybe it's something else, but the pigs just head straight for the water, and they go and they drown themselves. The demons say, "Don't let us be sent to the abyss. Send us into those pigs." So they go into the pigs, and then the pigs literally commit pig suicide, and the demons end up sent back down to the abyss. So once again, This is funny. This is like a Three Stooges bit. This is a sight gag. They say, hey, please don't let us be sent down into the realm of the dead yet. Let us go possess something else. How about those pigs? And Jesus says, do what you want. And they go over to the pigs, and the pigs say, yeah, no, we're not doing this. And they just go and kill themselves. And then the demons end up in the realm of the dead. They end up in the abyss. So the demons have no way of getting out, of being cast back down to the abyss where they belong. But the people in this Gentile region in the Decapolis, they've just lost thousands of dollars worth of pigs. There's an economic cost to all of this. And so they look at what's happening here, and they see two things at the same time. Number one, they see this man who used to be a boy, who used to be their friend, who used to be their childhood playmate, who used to be a member of their community, who used to be their family member, their son, their brother, their child. They see this man who's been demon-possessed for so many years. And they see that he's healed and restored, which should be a joyous thing. That should make their hearts glad. But they also see that they've lost some money because their pigs just drowned themselves. And they lose the ability to care about their friend who's been healed and restored. They lose the ability to celebrate the victory Christ has given him. All they can focus on is that they've lost some dollars on some freaking pigs. So they chase Jesus out of there. And this demon-possessed man who's now been healed and set free, he runs after Jesus and he says, hey, please, let me come follow you. Let me be your disciple. But Jesus says, wait. Not yet. Why does he say not yet? Most of the time, Jesus told people, come follow me. It seems like this guy should be a prime candidate, but it is not time for this guy to come follow him yet. It is not time for this man to become his disciple, his student yet. I think he will be. I would be willing to bet that eventually this man who was demon-possessed ended up a faithful follower of Jesus, either before his death and resurrection or after his death and resurrection. But right now, he has a really specific job. Jesus says, go tell all your friends what happened here. Go tell all your friends about how God, how Yahweh, how the God of Israel set you free. Go tell your Gentile friends about how the God of Israel came and set you free. This demon-possessed man is the first missionary to the Gentiles. He's going to go throughout the Decapolis and tell everyone who will listen about this man, Jesus, who's been sent by the God of Israel, and who they will later learn is the God of Israel, has come and broken the death grip of these demons over him. He's preparing the way for Jesus so that when Jesus arrives in the Decapolis, the people will hear and they will see. And their hearts and minds will already have been prepared to listen. That is Mark chapter 5. So let's talk about Mark chapter 5. What are some questions you have about Mark 5? What are some things that confuse you, that maybe don't make sense to you, that maybe challenge you a little bit? Post them in the comments of this YouTube video or in the Facebook group that we have set up for this group Bible reading plan, and we will tackle every single one of your questions together. So until then, take care. I love you guys.